Dear learners, I welcome you all to the very first video lecture of the massive open online course on Gender and the Media. As already explained in the introductory video of this lecture, in this particular course, we shall try to delve into the world of communication and then try to explore the role of communication in gender studies. Before going deeper into the topic, I think it is important at this stage to get a fair idea about the field of communication, which will provide an understanding and enable you learners to analyze the importance of communication in the study of gender. So in this first unit of the course, named Communication and Introduction, we shall try to discuss the meaning and definition of the concept of communication. We shall try to explore how a communication process takes place. We shall also try to understand the need and importance of the communication process, which will further give an understanding in analyzing the importance and need of communication studies in understanding gender. The English word communicare is derived from the Latin word communis, which means common sense. The word communication means sharing some ideas. In other words, it means the transmission and interaction of facts, ideas, opinions, feelings, or attitudes. Communication is a two-way process which involves the transfer of information or messages from one person or a group to another. This process goes on and includes a minimum of one sender and one receiver to pass on the messages. These messages can either be any idea, an imagination, an emotion, or thoughts. So there are different modes of communication available today. As you all know, these include emails, chats, WhatsApp, Skype, conference calls, etc. So effective communication makes people's work easier and smooth. So let us take a look at some of the definitions given by some communication experts. Harold Kuntz and Hannes Weyrich, they said communication is transfer of information from a sender to a receiver with the information being understood by the receiver. According to Rogers, communication is a process by which people create and share information with one another in order to reach a common understanding. According to Louis Allen, communication is the sum of all things a person does when he wants to create an understanding in the mind of another. It involves systematic and continuous process of telling, listening, and understanding. According to G.G. Brown, communication is transfer of information from one person to another, whether or not it elicits confidence, but the information transferred must be understandable to the receiver. And at last, according to Newman and Summer, communication is defined as an exchange of facts, ideas, opinions, or emotions by one or more persons. So let us take a look at the communication process. Have you ever wondered why some people can communicate so well and while some others, they fail to get their message across? So these involves some elements which must be present in the communication process for it to become successful and effective. Communication can be defined as the act of giving, receiving, or exchanging information, ideas, and opinions that we have already discussed, so that the message is completely understood by both the parties. Here in the slides, I am giving an illustration. It shows clearly that in a communication process, there must be a sender who speaks or sends a message and a receiver who listens or receives the message. the sender sends a message with a certain intention in mind. The receiver of the message tries to understand and interpret the message. The receiver then gives feedback to the original sender, who in turn interprets the feedback. The process, which is repeated continuously, constitutes communication. So clearly, there are several major elements in the communication process, as you can see here: a sender, a message, channel, receiver, feedback, context. There is both a speaker's intention to convey a message and a listener's reception of what has been said. Thus, listening skills are just as important as the speaking skills in order for the communication process to be effective and successful. This means that if you want to get your message across accurately, you need to consider these things: the message that you have formulated, the audience or the receiver for which you have formulated the message, and how the message is likely to be received by the receiver. A message is only considered successfully communicated when both the sender and the receiver perceive and understand the message in the same way. If this does not happen, then there may be a breakdown in the communication process, which may ultimately stand in the way of which you realizing your goals as a sender might not be fulfilled. So communication is an ongoing process that mainly involves three components, that is sender, message and recipient or the receiver, and the other elements that we have discussed so far. I hope the communication process and the meaning of communication is clear to you by now. There is another important aspect that I'll explain here shortly, that is the noise. Noise here refers to any kind of restrictions which has been caused by the sender or the message or the receiver during the communication process. For example, incorrect telephone connection, incorrect coding, incorrect recording, careless recipient, incorrect understanding of the message due to some barriers or discriminations, etc. So when we talk about the types of communication, there is the verbal communication and non-verbal. Verbal communication, if we go to understand, then communication occurs through verbal, oral or written communication that conveys a message to others, and that is called the oral communication. Verbal communication is the use of language to convey information verbally through spoken words or in sign language. Verbal communication is important because it works well. It can be helpful to support non-verbal communication. So any non-verbal communication that is passed on through signs and symbols or gestures can be supported through spoken words. And non-verbal communication occurs through signs, symbols, colors, touches, body language, facial features. So they use a lot of body language and facial expressions to convey the information to the other party. So verbal communication can be used both intentionally and deliberately or unintentionally. For example, if you may have a smile on your face when you hear an idea or a piece of interesting information, so these might convey your feelings or your expression regarding the idea. So as mentioned earlier, effective communication is a two-way process. So there can be a number of factors which may disrupt this process and affect the overall interpretation and understanding of what was communicated. So many problems can pop up at various stages of the communication process. So these can relate to any of the elements involved: the sender, the message, the channel, the receiver, feedback, or the context. So it is important to understand some of the factors that affect the communication process so that you can try to get your message across with minimal misunderstanding or confusion. So now let us talk about the barriers or the possible problems that might occur in the effective communication process. The sender and receiver of the message may be of equal status within a hierarchy. For example, managers in an organization, or they may be of at different levels. For example, manager and employee, lecturer and student, business owner and clients. So the difference in status sometimes affect the effectiveness of the communication process. Hence, the message has to be formulated keeping in mind the status or role of the communicators in a communication process. The cultural differences both within an organization or of the particular communicating parties, so the cultural differences, they might play an important role in the communication process. For example, talking to the ethnic or minority communities or the people belonging to different cultures. So these have to be kept in mind while formulating a message or while passing on a message to the other party. So before you choose your communication channel during the communication process, you should ask yourself whether the channel is appropriate for the particular purpose or the person for whom you are preparing the message. So that should be kept in mind. So sending messages via inappropriate channels can send out wrong signals or end up creating confusion. The length of the message is also very important. It might affect the communication process. You need to keep in your mind that the length of the message should serve the purpose and should be appropriate for the receivers. Is my message too long? Is my message too short? These all should be kept in your mind. Then poor choice of words or weak sentence structures, that might hamper the communication process. So you should keep in mind the use of the language, the words, the sentences that has been prepared, the use of punctuation while creating a message. Disabilities such as impaired sight, dyslexia, poor mental health, these all can act as barriers to a good communication process. So these all should be taken into consideration when evaluating the effectiveness of a communication process. You may need to use hearing aids, sign language. You may need to magnify the systems so that the other person may be able to understand what you are saying, what you have written. You may have to use symbols to alleviate the problems that might be caused by disabilities. Then whether the receiver is known or unknown to you, your relationship with the receiver, that might also play a major role in determining the effectiveness of your communication. A well-known receiver and person who you are close to may have a better understanding of your messages in despite of insufficient information. So this should also be taken into consideration. Sometimes the method of communication needs to take into consideration the receiver's personality traits, age, their preferred style, the elderly and the children. For example, they may have a different communication needs and preferences as compared to young adults or adults. So is the receiver of your message a visual, auditory or kinesthetic sort of person? Are you preparing the message for an elderly person? Are your messages targeted to children? So these should be kept in mind, and you should adapt your communication style to suit the that of your receivers. Our surroundings can sometimes pose as barriers to an effective communication. A noisy place, such as a party, for instance, they may usually put a strain on the oral communication, as both the receiver and the sender they have to put extra effort to get the message across. So your surroundings should be kept in mind, should play they play an important role in the effectiveness of the communication process. Is the message conveyed in a clear or ambiguous manner? That means whether your message is clear enough, is understandable enough. So use of words, use of easier simple sentences to pass on the message clearly is important. So feedback is very important as it enables the confirmation of the understanding or to be made by both the parties. So the lack of feedback can sometimes create problem as it shows uncertainty or confusion. Lack of feedback would create a confusion for the sender, as that sender might be confused whether his or her message has been clearly understood or not. As mentioned earlier, communication can both be oral or in the written form. Oral communication involves conveying ideas, thoughts, or information via a spoken language, while in the written communication, information is exchanged through written symbols, that is via words and sentences. Written communication is the sharing and exchanging of written symbols between individuals or groups. It is also the presentation of ideas in a coherent manner in the written form. So written communication can be done through letters, fax, email, reports, memos, advertisements, etc. So as the sender of messages, you should acquire a good writing skill through extensive reading, note-taking and listening in order to formulate an effective message via writing. It is important to keep an eye on grammar and vocabulary so that you may present your ideas, supporting details in a coherent manner. So we have already discussed the barriers that might come across in the effectiveness of a communication process. To briefly summarize the barriers, we may talk about the unfavorable response, the feedback that might be absent, the different environmental, physical, semantic and attitudinal barriers that might come across while having a communication process. So for a better understanding of the communication process, now let us have a look at the a few of the simple communication models which has been formulated for a better understanding of the communication process. The simplest model that has been presented for a better understanding of the communication model is the SMR model and the SMCR model. So here you can see in your slides, the S stands for sender, M for message, C for channel and R stands for the receiver. So as we have already discussed, I won't repeat it again. The sender sends across the message through a channel to the receiver, and below you can see the feedback. The feedback is important for the communication process to continue. Now let us have a look at the Aristotle's communication model. Aristotle, the great philosopher, he initiated the very first, the earliest, you can say, the mass communication model, which has been named as the Aristotle's model of communication. He proposed this model before 300 BC. He found the importance of audience's role in the communication process. So here it has been presented in his model. The model is more focused on public speaking than on the interpersonal communication. Aristotle's model of communication is formed with 5 basic elements: the speaker, the speech, the occasion, the audience, and the effect. Aristotle advises the speakers to build speech for different audiences on different time or occasion and for different effects. Basically, he says that for a different audience, for a different sort of context, you will build, as a sender, you will build up your speech, you will formulate your message in a different way so that you might get a different effect or result. The speaker plays an important role in public speaking. The speaker must prepare his or her speech and analyze the audience needs before preparing the speech or before entering the stage. The words spoken by the speaker should have an influence in the audience's mind and should be able to persuade their thoughts. For example, in ancient Greece, Alexander gave a brave speech to his soldiers in the war field so that they might be able to defeat the Persian Empire. So here the speaker is Alexander The speech is about his invasion, about his objective for invading that particular empire. Here the occasion is the war field, the impending war that is in front of them. Here the audience is his soldiers. He is speaking to his soldiers to boost their morale, to boost their morale before going to the war field. And what is the effect? He wants the effect, the result that Alexander wants is to defeat Persian Empire. Right. So here this is the context of that particular communication process. So as explained by Aristotle. Now let us have a look at another model of communication given by Warren Shannon and Weaver. In 1948, Shannon was an American mathematician. He was an electronic engineer, and Weaver, he was an American scientist. So both of them, they wrote an article about mathematical theory of communication, which later came to be known as the Shannon and Weaver model of communication. So this model is specifically designed to develop the effective communication between a sender and a receiver. Here, these two scientists, they find factors which affect the communication process known as noise that we discussed earlier in this particular lecture. So noise was first found out in this particular through this particular research done by Shannon and Weaver. At first, this model was developed to improve the technical communication. Later, it was widely applied in the field of communication. So this model basically deals with various concepts like information source, transmitter, noise, channel, message, receiver, information, destination, encoding, decoding. Okay, so we know a sender is the originator of the message or the information, the source from which the message comes out. The encoder means the transmitter which converts the message into signal. Basically, if we understand in the context of this particular model, so the sender's messages are converted into signals like waves or binary data, which is compatible to transmit the messages through cables or satellites. Because these two, Shannon and Weaver, they formulated this particular model keeping in mind the technical communication process. And then decoder is the reception place of the signal which has been converted into message. Okay, at the decoder's level, those signals would be received and would be decoded, which is a reverse process of encoding. The receiver converts this binary data or the waves into messages which is comfortable and understandable for the receiver. Otherwise, the receiver won't receive the exact message which has been sent by the receiver, and it will affect the communication process. Then again, the receiver is the destination of the message. The receiver is the destination to which the sender wants to send the message. Okay, so if the message is distracted by noise, it will affect the communication flow between the sender and the receiver. And the noise, as we have already discussed, the messages are transferred from encoder to decoder through the channel. During the process, the messages may be distracted or affected by physical noise such as sounds of thunder, crowd, noise, or the encoded signals may distract in the channel during the transmission process, which might affect the communication flow. The receiver may receive which may not receive the correct message. So the model clearly deals with the external noises only, which might affect the messages or signals from external sources. So every bit of message communicated undergoes a certain process involving more than one person. So nobody communicates to a vacuum or wilderness, isn't it? Communication is considered effective only when it is received by a receiver and a desired response, result or reaction is achieved. So all communication are related to some context. In any context, a communication loop exists to enable successful communication. The sender or encoder chooses the appropriate medium based on several factors such as the receiver, the message, its urgency or otherwise. He may choose a non-verbal communication, a signal, body language, speech, writing, or any other available medium to transmit the encoded message. The message gets transmitted to the receiver. The receiver decodes the message and perceives it. Unless the receiver is aware of the code and is adept in using the medium, he cannot decode it. So misinterpretation may arise at this stage, even if the interference even if there is no interference in the medium. So the receiver's response or reaction is the feedback that the sender gets. The feedback may again be a signal or an action. In short, the communication is related to the context. Context is determined by the place and the culture, okay, that is prevalent in that particular area, and the individual's mindset and the attitude, particularly the environment and the stimuli, external and internal, that determine the actual process of the communication. The message is the core idea that a sender wants to communicate. The sender should very carefully decide upon the while framing the message, that what he or she wants to communicate and what's the result that he or she wants. Okay, the sender has to take into consideration the context of one's communication, then the attitude of the receiver. So based on all these factors, the sender should choose the frame the message and choose the medium for transmitting the message. So it is very interesting to note that a vast majority of us, we communicate several messages without using speech quite often. For example, we use different kind of body language that I have already spoken about. So one theory on the origin of language is also called as the gesture theory. So this gesture theory, it tries to establish that speech originated from gestures. Okay, someone has aptly said that the communication oozes out through one's fingertips. Okay, though this may appear to be an exaggerated statement, we may consider it. We do not nod our heads or show approval, or we shake our heads to indicate disapproval, right? Isn't it? So when you are offered a cup of tea, if you want to say no thank you, but if you shake your head or cross your hands, isn't it? This is what our communication, our words are always accompanied by one or other gesture, like shaking of our heads, nodding of our head, the hands that we use for simple gestures, isn't it? Our eyes, we may smile. All these are part of the entire communication process. So when someone is in difficulty, that person might wring his hands in frustration. The study of body language is also known as kinesis. So body language is so important that a description of it has entered into our spoken language. Different other factors also play important roles, such as paralanguage. That means some sounds like ha, making sounds with your tongue. These all have values in the communication process. Then silence can also play an important role. People might make you understand or want to make you understand through their silences. So all these are a part of the communication process. So these all everything that we have discussed so far will give you an idea, a basic idea about understanding what communication is. So this is just an introduction about the communication process. I hope so far you have understood what communication is and how important it is in our lives, and how we use communication every day, from the moment we wake up till the moment we sleep at night. We use communication, and it is an integral part of our life. And in the later stages, in the later units, we will try to understand the other intricate details about the communication process, and later on we move towards its role, its importance, and its need in understanding about the gender studies. Thank you, and we shall meet in the next lecture.